Hey, my name is Austin Black, and today we're going to look at the A6500. This review is more focused on video than photography, but I have taken lots of photos with it too, and we'll look at that. We're going to talk about lenses, we're going to talk about the video features, we're going to talk about using it with a gimbal, we're going to talk about accessories, the image quality, we're going to compare it to a few other cameras. Okay, so first things first, it's a 24 megapixel APS-C sensor. So it is a crop censored camera, but it's probably one of the best spec'd crop censored cameras. For an APS-C camera, it's got a lot of features, it's got great image quality, it actually shoots a 6K image and downsamples it to 4K. And you get really pretty results for video. This is an APS-C camera, but it actually does really well in low light compared to other competitors like the Panasonic GH4, which is a micro four thirds camera, or the Canon 80D, which is another APS-C sensor. I've gotten results up to 6400 ISO that I'd consider usable for video. I actually shot a concert at 8000 ISO exclusively, and I think the results looked really good. There was noise, but it showed up as like tasteful film grain. Another feature new to the A6500 is touchscreen autofocus. And while I think it works pretty well, its use seems to be a little bit limited due to Sony's laggy interface. So it has some really cool video features. Zebras, focus peaking. It's got a really cool feature that a lot of people don't talk about called clear image zoom. Now that's where you can punch in digitally 2 times by sampling a smaller part of the sensor. So it's got a 24 megapixel sensor, 4K takes up 8 megapixels, so you've got a lot of latitude to sample a smaller part of the sensor. And that's really cool for video. Another cool feature in this camera is the ability to shoot S-Log2, S-Log3. Personally, I stay in Cine 4 with this camera, but a lot of people have great results using S-Log. I think with a camera like the A7S, you might get better results shooting S-Log because the noise might be less apparent. I tend to notice with this camera, S-Log looks a little bit noisy, especially S-Log3. I would say S-Log3 on this camera, it's tricky to use. So comparing this to the Canon 80D, which is like the most direct competitor, the autofocus isn't going to be quite as good. I don't know how good the results would be using this camera for shooting sports. The 80D also has a flip out screen, which is really useful. This has an articulating screen. It'll flip up. You can shoot from the hip like this, which is really useful, but it'd be really nice if you could flip it up and over or flip it to the side. Unfortunately, you can't. Another nice feature with this camera is the 5-axis image stabilization built into the body. That's new from the Sony A6300. I find that it helps a little bit when you're shooting something handheld, but for the most part, it doesn't replace image stabilization in the lens. I think it supplements it, and then this camera is light enough to fly on a gimbal like the Zhiyun Crane, which is an accessory I love to use with this camera. So let's talk lenses for a minute. This is actually the first lens I bought for this camera. I'm actually switching from the Canon ecosystem to Sony. This is the Sigma 30mm f1.4. 30 millimeters on APS-C is a 45 millimeter equivalent. So this is a great like fast prime, walk around with it lens. I've gotten really good results with portraits. I find it to be really sharp, but something you're going to see on a lot of these Sony lenses is that the fly-by-wire focus system leaves a lot to be desired for manual focus pulls. The good thing is it's a native E-mount lens. The autofocus is great, but you're gonna run into issues when you try to pull focus manually. Here's one of my favorite lenses. It's the Sony 10-18. The A6500 actually has image stabilization built into the body, but I find using a lens like this that has Sony's optical steady shot tends to get the best results. And this lens is super light. It's great to fly on a gimbal. Handheld walking around, I often find that the footage is usable. Whereas with a lens like the Sigma, I think you find a lot of the time that it's not usable, even though the body has that image stabilization. I also have this Rokinon 85mm Cine lens. It's a fully manual lens. It's got the aperture ring here, manual focus. I kind of bought this lens because of the Sony's fly-by-wire system and how it's just really hard to do manual focus pulls. So this is kind of like my big bokeh manual focus lens. You get decent results from it, but it's probably my least used lens. So finally, this brings us to the big guy, the 24-70 f2.8 G Master lens. And this is an expensive lens. I paid about $2,000 for it, but it's well worth it. It's really the best type of lens to use when you're shooting an event. You're gonna need that versatility, otherwise you might miss the shot. And the f2.8 constant aperture lets you shoot in relatively low light situations. On the APS-C camera, it's a 35 to 105 equivalent, and then you can use clear image zoom to punch in 2 times, making it a 35 to 210 millimeter lens effectively. So you can get just about any shot with this lens. Now that's a big problem switching to the Sony ecosystem, is to get good glass like this, you're gonna have to pay for it. Let's talk audio for a second. What I use with the A6500 is the Rode VideoMic Pro with one of these fuzzy dead cats. It's got this plus 20 dB mode, and in the camera I can set the levels all the way down so the preamps don't have to work as hard. That being said, the camera has really good preamps, and they're a lot better than what you'd find in a Canon DSLR. So let's look at a few negatives with this camera, things I'd be worried about buying it again. First off, battery life. It's well documented. These are tiny, tiny batteries. You're gonna be seeing the battery exhausted screen so much. But that's kind of to be expected with a camera this small. And you know, I found myself just plan ahead and it's not a big issue. Another negative with this camera is the ergonomics of it. The card slot is in a weird spot in the battery bay right here. Another issue is the headphone jack, or lack thereof. A lot of people complain about this. It's pretty easy to get a monitor that has a headphone out. The record button is in a very strange spot, so much so that I had to dedicate a custom button to record, because your thumb doesn't want to do that. Another issue with this camera that's actually pretty big is rolling shutter. It's something to certainly keep in mind before buying it. Like I said, I'd really like a flip out screen, and the overheating definitely hasn't been solved like some people would make you believe. You can record past a certain temperature now, but that's kind of like a dangerous solution for a camera like this. Like, it overheats and we'll just let it get even hotter. That's how we solve it. And I still ran into issues after about 20 minutes of recording. So that's kind of it. I've shot with it for a couple months now. I really like it. It's a beast of an APS-C camera. It's got specs that compete with much more expensive cameras. That being said, it has a lot of frustrations that hold it back. Ergonomics, overheating, battery life. Overall, I really like what Sony did with this camera. The specs and the features are much more than you'd expect of a camera in this price range. The shortcomings, I think, are all manageable. They just require a little bit of planning and a little bit of getting used to. So that's my review of the Sony A6500. For more tech reviews, vlogs, subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.